everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Inside Lowell Daily Pulse, the Tuesday, January 14th, 2025 edition of the Daily Pulse. I'm your host, Teddy Panos, here in the WellPoint Studios, along with my special guest this morning. He is the superintendent of schools here in the city of Lowell, and he's kind enough to be joining us here in studios after his ears were no doubt ringing last Thursday morning. Liam Skinner is here with us. Good morning, Superintendent Skinner. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, Teddy. I'm delighted to be back. Thank you for having me on today.
Good to have you back, and I'm also pleased to report that not only are we going to talk today about some specific concerns that were brought up during last Thursday's show with Jerry Nutter, but we're going to bring you back periodically. We want to bring you back on a monthly basis to update folks on what's happening in the Lowell schools and what's happening with you and your staff. So we're excited about that. I just want to quickly thank our friend Real Estate Ray Booten. He is the sponsor of the Inside Lowell Daily Pulse. Real Estate Ray Booten, as he's known, is a licensed realtor in both Massachusetts and New Hampshire. He's the certified appraiser in both of those states as well. So if you're looking to buy or sell a home or a commercial property, Real Estate Ray Booten is your man. realestaterayBooten.com. We'll tell you more about the rest of our Inside Lowell podcast sponsors in a few minutes. I do want to let you know we're coming here from the WellPoint Studios. WellPoint is the only healthcare plan offering healthcare benefits exclusively to Massachusetts GIC members. At WellPoint, your whole health is their whole point. Thank you to WellPoint. Thanks again to Superintendent Skinner. All right, so I went back and I listened to the podcast because I understand you had some concerns with the information that was put out last Thursday, and folks can go back and watch the Daily Pulse from Thursday, January 9th. We had Jerry Nutter, former Lowell School Committeeman on here, former WCAP radio show host. And as is kind of his usual focus when he's doing these type of things, he was looking in on some school budget things, and he had a number of questions and concerns. First off, your reaction to that. From what I hear, you weren't happy with that discussion.
Well, Jerry Nutter is a very well-respected figure in town. He also made it clear that he wasn't speaking as an authority, and so I think it's an opportunity for me to come on and present you with with accurate information and with updated information that I think should be out in the public, because it's what the real story is, right? If I think sometimes if we share speculative information, that can lead to speculation and lead to questions. I'd rather people know exactly where we stand.
Okay, and to be clear, as I went back and I re-listened to it because I made my list of points that he made, he did point out, in fairness to Jerry, that he doesn't think there was anything overtly wrong, nefarious, and I asked specifically, do these questions that you're asking point to some type of structural imbalance or just a potentially questionable reporting in terms of how things were written or where they were categorized? And he said he didn't believe there was anything structurally wrong there, but he did indicate he thought there were some concerns on the city side. He's picking up information. Is that accurate? Is there any concern that you're getting from anybody on the city side of the administration over the budgeting and the reporting of the budget?
There are no concerns about the budget or the reporting of the budget. We meet with city officials regularly, at least monthly. We talk with them almost on a daily basis. We have a great rapport with them. There are no concerns of the sort that were indicated on the podcast, at least none that I've been made aware of. We have talked with some of our city partners since that podcast, and again, nothing has emerged. I will tell you something really important, though, before we get into that. I say it is really important that superintendents of schools be held accountable, and that local media and school committee and everyone else, that they ask questions and demand explanations for things, right? That's really important. What I'm after, though, is just that accurate information be reported. And if people have speculation, that they ask the right people the questions and not simply speculate as if there might be an issue when there really isn't one. And my concern is simply that when there's a speculation that's inaccurate, it distracts us from the real work. It distracts us for the real reason why we go to work in the morning, which is to benefit our community and in particular the education of students. If we get into speculation about things that are not factual and not true, it leads us down the road of being very distracted and upsetting the work that we're doing.
And I understand that viewpoint. In the world of talk radio or in podcasting, there's some level of speculation, and there isn't that ability to instantly get an update. If we were doing a radio show together, I would have certainly had reached out to you and said, hey, this is what Jerry's saying. You want to call in and address some of these things. Sure. We're doing it a few days later here. First point, is the correct budget online? Has it been updated online? Is the budget that people are seeing if they go to the school committee's, school department's website right now, is that the most recent budget, and is it the most up-to-date information on that budget?
So, now I want to be really careful to be accurate, right? So the answer is yes. But I have to qualify that just a little bit. You understand that periodically there are updates. I didn't go on there this morning, right? So, but yes, I believe what's online is accurate.
Okay, so the figures budgeted in each department, each line, they're the budget for the full academic year, the current academic year.
That's correct.
Okay. Jerry mentioned that the auditor's report, now this is the city auditor who kind of overlooks at some of this stuff, shows that there were charges to accounts that had no funding in them. I want to give you a chance to address that. Is that why is that the case? Is that a normal practice? Is it simply a mistake? What happened there? Is that accurate, first of all?
Okay, so can I address it in a couple of ways, right? So I think some of the information that was broadcast was a misunderstanding of what people were looking at. And an example was that some concern was voiced that more than 79% of the school department's transportation budget had been used, despite the fact that we were not even halfway through the school year. 79% of the budget for transportation is already used, right? So that sounds very concerning, right? But it's very accurate that 79% of the budget has been spent or encumbered. The auditor's report that was being referred to was accurate. And it's accurate that 79% of our transportation budget at that point had been spent and encumbered for the rest of the school year. That's an accurate report. You could misread that and make it into a problem, but it isn't a problem, and there is no problem there. Okay. Let me go back to the question that you asked about. If you are doing absolutely perfectly clean budgeting, of course, when you charge for something, there should be money there to sort of pay that cost. There are, however, I think somewhere, don't quote me, somewhere in the region of 1,900 lines in the budget. And many people are involved in making the charges. Occasionally, a charge will be made to the wrong line item. Let's ask Teddy if we went on a field trip to Boston today, should the busing be charged to field trips or should it be charged to transportation? What would you choose?
I would probably choose transportation, but if I guess you could do either one. Okay,
so someone somewhere might make a different choice. It was a field trip. Let's charge it to field trips, right? It's possible. Shouldn't happen, literally, but it does happen all the time. There are very, very few instances of it in the school department budget right now. Part of what the auditor report does, it helps us to dig in and find out and to correct those types of errors. So they do occur, and then they're corrected. That's a normal part of a process.
How often, that's an important question. So how often does that occur? How often does somebody look at the entries and say, okay, well, why is this here? Why is it there? And then whether it's your CFO, or I guess now the official title is Assistant Superintendent of Finance, how often do they get together with the city side and kind of, balance these books or, right, put everything in the right space?
Right. So I think the answer to the question that you're looking for is monthly.
Monthly, okay.
But it's also accurate enough to say it happens all the time. They don't sit around and wait till the next month's meeting to make sure. There are processes in place to make continual updates to the budgets and make continual charges, for example, and to make continual corrections as well.
Okay. Is there any uniform standard? Does does the Department of Education have like certain guidelines, standards that should be followed by all schools when budgeting? And then conversely, do city and town auditors have the same kind of guidelines so that we don't have these kind of misinterpretations of it? Are the guidelines being followed?
It's a great question. There are guidelines for the schools. There are guidelines for the city. They are being followed. There's something called funding codes. Staffing is paid for from one funding code. If you're using a grant for something, it's a different funding code, and so on and so forth. Much more sophisticated than I'm able to give you an answer to. But the answer to your question is yes, and they are being used, and they're being used very, very well. And our budget management is going very, very well.
Okay, I want to talk about that transportation budget. You kind of answered it, and and by the way, school committeeman Fred Bahu reached out to me less than a day later and answered some of these questions for me. But by that point, we had kind of already set everything up with you. So I want to give you a chance to talk about it. But I do have a question on what that whole encumbered spend thing is and why that total doesn't equal 100. But one of the other points, Jerry mentioned that there's a grant manager position funded that does not exist. Now, I did receive an answer for that as well from Committeeman Bahu, but I want to give you a chance to.
Right, that's outright false. So the concern was that you see a charge to a grant manager, and as you said, that the position doesn't exist. That's just false. We have a grants manager, and that's why that charge was there. We've had a grants manager right along. I don't know for how long, but for a number of years, and we have a grants manager right now today.
Okay. My understanding when following up with Jerry on that was that it was a position that was not funded for a year, I believe, under Dr. 𝐒𝐤𝐢𝐧𝐭, or he created it and then it wasn't funded for a year, but then it came back, right? But it was before, it's been back since before you assumed the helm of the schools.
I don't recall. It's Dr. 𝐒𝐤𝐽𝐬, I think you're going back quite a ways, 2014.
Yeah, there was one superintendent in there between you.
Right. And so there were a number of people, I think, but at any rate, I don't know how long it's existed, but it's existed for as long as I can recall, certainly for the last 4 or 5 years.
Okay. Another point. The auditor's report showed a $5 million line item for something called citywide negotiators. It was explained to me that that's simply a matter of that was for negotiated pay raises, and maybe the wording was a little bit awkward, but please, what is that $5 million line item for?
Okay. I shouldn't laugh at this, but the name or the line should have read negotiated raises. So we have to make a provision in our budget if we're in negotiations with the union. We were with the teachers union for pay raises, and when those pay raises are agreed to, we have to be able to make the payment. And so we did transfer $5 million to meet the need for that pay raise that we had negotiated and agreed to. It should have been labeled negotiated raises. Someone recorded it. There are any number of people whose hands are on the budget, and if I'm both the school department and the city, somewhere along the line, somebody wrote in the term negotiators. $5 million used for negotiators, which is not accurate. It should have said negotiated raises, which is what the money was for.
Okay, which leads to one of the follow-up questions. And I think I might have touched on this when I said other standards, why are things being coded differently in the school and city budgets?
Well, that's a technical question. I don't know the answer to. I don't know that they are being coded differently. I don't know that, Teddy. I don't know that there's a concern there.
Okay. I guess the school's version of the CFO, Chief Financial Officer, is your assistant superintendent of finances. There was some questions. Jerry had some questions, saying, "Hey, listen, he came from." Listed the background, said he's worked with $80-90 million budgets. He's now overseeing a $250 million budget. Is this individual, are you confident this is the right individual for that job? Is he up to the task? Because there was a question about that.
Sure. So he is an absolutely thorough professional. He is calling his abilities and ability to do this job into question feels to me as incredibly unfair. That man is very, very committed and very, very competent and expert. He's well regarded by the city folks, not just the school department folks, and he has done incredible work in a very short amount of time. One example of that I'll give you. last year, I called for an audit of our finances in our finance department because I wanted to figure out where we were not meeting muster. That report, called the Abrams report, was shared with the school committee, and it listed any number of improvements to be made. And our assistant superintendent for finance, his name is Derek Pinto, had one of the first things he tackled with a high priority. I think he began with us in late September, and in really quick time, he had turned around for the school committee a report on all the fixes based on the recommendations in that Abrams report. He's a thorough professional, and he's done remarkable work. And you can, to my way of thinking, you cannot call into question his work to date in Lowell.
And I was going to ask about that. How long has he been on the job? You answered that. You said since September, so he's only been there 4 months and some change. Was he even involved in some of these, posting of this budget, the coding of things and whatnot? He wasn't even involved in that, right? So to question him on that does kind of seem a little bit unfair, based on he's probably still getting his feet wet after only a third of a year and trying to figure out where everything is in the lines and et cetera, right?
Yes, you can say that. He just has made remarkable progress and has been a really thorough professional and very, very competent. He's not only responded to the issues that were in that Abrams report, but you need to be at central office to appreciate the way he's pulled the department together and has really organized systems for balances and checking and so forth. Is a wonderful professional.
Okay. And now I am told that you had, that you acknowledged that there were some things that were confusing in how they were entered and whatnot. And I believe you cited the example of the field trip versus transportation money. Are there steps being taken to ensure that any such confusion like that doesn't happen? Or is that, to your mind, just the normal part of budgeting when you've got a $250 million budget with 1,000 some odd lines, as you described?
I think we have to take the attitude that anytime we find an anomaly or something, for instance, that's just confusing, it's not necessarily wrong, but it's confusing, that we have to do something about that. And I think we have to be transparent about it. And so that's going to continue, and that's already the way we approach it. I think, I don't know. I mean, back in the day, we used to balance our checkbooks, and you never got it right on the first try, right? And you had to go back and figure out what we were missing to, I think that kind of process occurs in all finance work, where you've got to continually be vigilant. You've got to find out where there are discrepancies, and you've got to root them out. That is happening, and it's happening without any particular issue and without any need for concern.
All right. We're chatting with Lowell School Superintendent Liam Skinner. He's joining us here on the Inside Lowell Daily Pulse on this Tuesday, January 14th, 2025. Going to get back to our conversation and wrap it up in a few minutes. I just quickly want to thank all of our Inside Lowell podcast sponsors. Of course, Real Estate Ray Booten sponsoring the Inside Lowell Daily Pulse. If you're looking to buy or sell a property or to have it appraised in Massachusetts or New Hampshire, Real Estate Ray Booten is your man. Thank you as well to our friends at WellPoint. We're here in the WellPoint studios. At WellPoint, your whole health is their whole point. Washington Savings Bank, a community bank in every sense of the word. Make the switch now to Washington Savings Bank. TMI Properties, quality and value at every price point. Find your perfect space with TMI. Mahoney Oil, providing warmth and protection to Greater Lowell and Southern New Hampshire since 1925. Do the math there, gang. 2025, 1925. Even I can figure it out. That's 100 years. That's a century. Francis E. Preventure Insurance. Speaking of experience and service to the community, that's the agency Greater Lowell has counted on since 1982. And, of course, the Massachusetts Pirates, bringing all the hard-hitting action and excitement of arena football to the Mill City and to the Sanger Center. Opening night for the Pirates in Lowell, March 21st. We're a little bit over 2 months away from that. We return to the Lowell School Superintendent, Liam Skinner. All right, one question I asked on the podcast that I want to give you a chance to with the podcast with Jerry that I want to give you a chance to respond to. I was wondering how much of this was a challenge for you based on your background. You had a classroom background. And some folks come to a superintendent position with maybe a little bit more of a financial background, right? Perhaps they were a CFO or on that side of things. But you're on the academic side. Classroom teacher for a long time, principal for a long time. I believe as assistant superintendent, you were kind of in charge of all the principals and that. How comfortable are you with budgeting and all this stuff? And how fair is it to kind of hammer you specifically on this stuff if based on, the fact that you've only been overseeing it for like a year and a half now?
Sure. How fair is it, Teddy? Very fair. You should ask questions. I believe in that. This goes back to something I said at the beginning. Public officials should be held accountable. We should be asked questions. And if I'm not the right guy to ask, I should provide you with somebody who can answer the questions. It happens that I'm very comfortable with the budgeting and I'm very comfortable with numbers. I was a math major in the day. And I learned a lot during my first year at central office because we had a lot of work to do in the budgeting area and we were short-staffed quite a lot of that time. So I learned more about budgeting than I intended to last year. But right now, I couldn't be more comfortable because we have a really tremendous, competent professional leader in that department, our assistant superintendent for finance, Derek Pinto. So we're in a very good position in that department in our school.
And after I said that, I realized, as principal, he had to do a budget for a school building. Obviously, it's different when you have to do a whole school system. But how long does it take you to get up to speed on something like that, being in, overseeing the entire district and the budget for the entire district as opposed to a school building or a particular department?
Well, I think that depends a lot, Teddy. On I do have a math background, and so figures and numbers, budgets might be a little bit easier for me to get into than someone else. I didn't intend to become so familiar with the budget until we had need to get into that last year. We were short-staffed, and I spent a lot more time working on the budgets than I intended to. Because I spent that amount of time, I learned a lot. And so I became familiar with the budgets very quickly. In a different circumstance, I might not have paid much attention to it, but I had to, and therefore it gave me an education.
All right. I don't want to give you an excuse or an out, but I would probably, in my mind of thinking, based on what you say, you were shorthanded. You had issue with the former chief financial officer, or whatever the title was, Billy Joe Turner, had taken a leave. She wasn't there. She ended up leaving, and as you mentioned, you only brought in the new guy, Derek Pinto, in September. Did that set you guys back? How much of a challenge did that create? Because you got to put your budget together one way or the other, right, by July 1st.
Right.
And here you are, you're having a major change, somebody out on leave, and the new person isn't in until September.
So you asked two questions in there. How much of a challenge was that, and and were we able to accomplish it? It was a tremendous challenge. We not only lost our CFO, but we also lost our assistant CFO last year in the middle of the school year. So it was a big challenge. It was accomplished. All the budgeting work, importantly, all the spending of last year's budget, because we have had a history of leaving some money on the table. I was determined that not happen. So we spent out our budgets last year very, very well and very, very thoroughly. We produced a new budget for this school year, and we presented to the school committee in May. That was approved, and we moved on through the summer with that work. How were we doing that without a leader in place? We were doing it by committee. There are some really wonderful, and I want to tell you, heroic people at central office. I should start naming them, but I'd be afraid I'd leave someone out. But we had several individuals, Teddy, who worked at yeoman's work. We had a school principal leave his school because he had the right certification for the job and came down to help us out in the summertime. Various people, a technology person who was just really proficient with spreadsheets and organizing data. And we also got some outside counsel to make sure that we were doing it well. But that was a big challenge. I'm very proud of what happened during that time. It was done very well.
And some of the confusion potentially a result of some of that?
Not at all.
Not at all.
Not at all. The confusion, Teddy, that has occurred recently is based on misinterpretation of the auditor's report and or some errors that were made, like, for example, that we don't have a grants manager. If you believe we don't have a grants manager, you, of course, would be concerned that we're charging for one. We do have a grants manager. So there really isn't an issue there. There's no there.
All right. So we'll wrap it up with the kind of what I found the most surprising thing that was said, and that was 79.5, I believe, percent was the exact number of the transportation money has been spent, and it's only early January. We still got half the school year to go. We're in trouble. That was the impression given. Now, Jerry did, say that that might have been, he left the door open that there was some type of reporting things going on. You've since explained, and others on the school committee have explained to me that 79% of the money has been either spent or encumbered. For the layperson out there, when I was that layperson last Thursday, tell me the difference between spent and encumbered.
Wow. Okay, I can explain the difference, but I'm not exactly the expert. But let's say you subscribe to a cable TV service, and you subscribe for a year. How much is that going to cost you?
Too much.
Too much, right? Whatever amount it is, you have to put that money aside to pay the bill. That's encumbered. You might not have spent. You might have to send in your check every month, and every time you send in a check, you're spending your money. But because you set aside money to pay the bill, that's called encumbering. I think that's a fair explanation. And so, 79.5% in that report what was spent and encumbered. That's accurate, and that's normal. And you notice it leaves a little wiggle room for changes. We have new students come to Lowell all the time. We have homeless students. We have migrant students. We sometimes have new bills to pay for transportation, and we have made provision for doing that as well.
All right. That's a lot of room. That's a lot of wiggle room, 20%. Because my question that was going to be, why isn't the total, if it's spent and encumbered combined, that should equal 100%.
Right.
Right?
But if you know that you're going to have bills this spring that we have, like, for example, if we know we're going to need to contract with somebody for transportation and we haven't written that contract yet, we don't know what amount to encumber, right? The money will be encumbered when we've made the contracts with people.
Is that so? As I kind of looked into some of those numbers a little bit, we're talking about $3 million or so, right? Is that the number?
Offhand, I don't have that number.
It's a significant percentage, 20%.
Sure.
Right.
You know what, Teddy? You keep on digging, right? You keep on digging, you'll find something there that's a big controversy.
I'm not looking for a controversy. I'm just trying to think, like, you're going to get hit with, like, potential charges between now and June 30th that could equal 20% of the transportation money? Because you answered my question, so it should be 100%. You leave some for wiggle room. A contractor would call that the contingency fee, right, when they're doing a high school construction project. But, they've got, what, a $10 million contingency fee on a $400 million project. That's significant.
I don't know if that's if it's a good analogy to say it's like a contingency fee. The budget was based on what we thought we'd need. How about this? How about somebody at central office negotiated really well to bring down the costs of one of those contracts, and they're savings, right? But that's what we do every day, right? And so we are hard negotiators to reserve our funds for classrooms for the most part. I don't know this to speak of, but one of the strong possibilities is that we have managed our money so well that we've only encumbered 79.5%. It's in all likelihood we will spend much more between now and the end of the school year, as is normal, right? These are normal events. It doesn't mean you shouldn't ask the questions, but let's get our facts right and let's put out the correct information.
Okay. And so with that, last year, did you encumber, or did you have kind of a similar percentage left as a contingency, and that got gobbled up between January and June 30th?
I don't have that to hand, but I tell you, Teddy, last year was very different. Last year was very different. We didn't have the financial management team that we now have in place.
Okay. And last question, you touched on a little bit earlier, and we kind of came back to you. You said, what if you negotiated brilliantly or spent the money so wisely that you're going to have 20% left over? 20%, if my very pedestrian understanding of that budget is correct, could be anywhere from like a $2 to $3 million that might be left over. You mentioned that, you know, in the past, that's been a problem. You've had money that wasn't spent, so you wanted to make sure everybody spent that. Is that really a problem? Shouldn't that money go back to the, you know, whether it's now some people say go back to the city side, but ultimately that money should go back to the taxpayers. Should it not?
You may have that perspective, but the money was set aside for school use, and most of our budget comes from the state. The state allocates funding. If we leave money on the table, what that means to me is we did not work to provide enough services for students in classrooms. If they doubled our budget, Teddy, I could spend it. I could tell you how it could be spent responsibly to benefit students in our community. We have a certain amount that we have to live within, and we're going to make sure that we spend that responsibly and that we do spend it down. There should not be a case where we're sending money back.
Can that money be reassigned to something else, whether it's the classroom, paras, mental health, council, what athletics, whatever the case may be? That money can be reassigned. It's not simply in the transportation pot.
So that's correct. But you know, there are. You talked earlier on about rules and so on. We have to stay within the rules. So you might be able to reassign the money to some areas, but not necessarily to all areas. And when we have ideas on that, and when we think there's a way to spend our money more responsibly and more strategically, we bring that to our school committee, and the school committee makes some good choices about which projects to fund.
All right. Have we clarified all your concerns about the
Have I clarified all your concerns?
I think so. I mean, again, some of it was clarified for me within a day. The biggest question I had, again, was that 79%. Why isn't that 100%? But you've explained that.
We live in an age where you know, sometimes the truth is not respected as it used to be. There's a lot of disinformation, a lot of misinformation. I don't believe that anything was put out that was intentionally misleading, but some of the reporting was misleading, and I hope that I've helped to clear that up for you. And I encourage you or anyone else to ask us questions if you have questions. We should be held accountable, but we should try to make sure our community is informed with accurate information.
You've cleared it up as far as I'm concerned. We'll see what follow-up questions Jerry Nutter has on Facebook or whatnot. But I appreciate it. Liam Skinner, Superintendent of Schools in Lowell, thank you for coming in. As we mentioned, we're going to make this a monthly occurrence. We're going to try, I think, what do we say, the first Thursday of every month? Because you have a school committee meeting on the first Wednesday of every month. So we'll grill you on all the happenings there with your bosses on the school committee.
I look forward to it.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to thank you for joining us as well on the Inside Lowell Daily Pulse. Tuesday, January 14th. Tomorrow, Wednesday the 15th, Lowell City Manager Tom Golden is going to sit in that seat where Superintendent Skinner was sitting. Lots to talk about with him. Thursday, we're going to have a special Zoom guest, the State Auditor, Diana DiZoglio. It's getting heated. If you're following the State House news and what's going on between the auditor's attempt to audit the legislature and the pushback she's getting from the House and the Senate, it's a lot of stuff going on. Well, we're going to get the auditor on here Thursday to talk a little bit about that and what recourse she has if ultimately the House and Senate decide not to abide by the law that you, 72% of you in Massachusetts, the voters, passed last November. Lots to talk about here on the Inside Lowell Daily Pulse. On Friday, Jo Marie Buckley is going to join us. We'll talk a little bit about Tewksbury and who knows what else with her. Lots of good stuff coming up here. Hope you follow us each and every day here on the Inside Lowell Daily Pulse. Till tomorrow, everybody stay safe, stay warm.